So I'm just about finished my custom bindings for Andy Weir. I'm at the stage where I'm ready to add the final touches, but that's not what this video is about. I want to take you through how I made them, starting with my first inspiration, which came from Andy himself.
Well, for both the Dune binding and the D&D binding, I really liked how you put like a metallic thing on there. Like, you know, you put like a metal element. I thought that was pretty cool.
That pretty much sealed the deal that I'd have to add some sort of metallic elements to his books. And from the get-go, that informed my design process. The only question was, what to make them out of? I scratched my head for quite a while until inspiration struck while I was browsing through a mineral shop. There I saw something that immediately reminded me of xenonite from Project Hail Mary. And from there it was a short leap to Rocky's miniatures from the book. It was perfect. What I'd found was a slice of iron-nickel meteorite. Its crystalline structure, which reminded me of the fictional material xenonite, is called a Wittgenstein pattern, which can only be formed in space as the molten cores of asteroids cool over millions of years. What then could be more appropriate to finish off a set of books for Andy Weir himself? Nothing. That's what. I was going to make my version of xenonite miniatures for him, carved from a literal space rock. Now, the short version of this story is that that's easier said than done. For such a sci-fi material, my toolkit is decidedly not. Most of what I'll be doing will be hand engraving, fully old school. For that, I've got my trusty big hammer, a scribe, and a few gravers, 2 of which I made myself. Of course, I'll use technology where I can, like this hot glue, which I'll use to fix the workpiece to a block of wood. This will be essential to hold the work as I hammer on it. I want full coverage on the back for support, so I'll use a heat gun to smear that around before sticking the meteorite on. That needs far fewer than 1,000,000 years to cool, so now I need to get my designs onto the metal. I finished my drawings of the miniatures in my notebook, so the first thing to do is to scan them so I can get them into the computer to clean them up. My sketches are a bit faint, but I need the printouts to be really black in order to get a good transfer onto the metal. What's more, I want the lines for the Hail Mary and the rover to be nice and sharp, so I'll trace over my loose pencil sketches to clean them up. Once those are cleaned up, I'll print out multiple copies on my laser printer. And yes, it has to be laser, as inkjet won't transfer. Back in the shop, I'll cut out a little Hail Mary to get started. I don't have a lot of material to work with, so taping the image on will make sure that I get it placed correctly. I'm going to be using acetone to transfer the image, but first I need to get the surface cleaned up. I'll give it a light sanding with 800 grit paper, then I'll clean it again with acetone. A trick I learned from a YouTube video is to finish by sticking on packing tape and then lifting it off. I don't know why this works, but it does give a better result. Maybe it removes little particles, or maybe it leaves a bit of adhesive. I don't know. I've also got this little bit of broken agate burnisher handy to rub things down a bit. Applying acetone to the back of the paper softens up the toner enough that it can be transferred to the metal. I rub it down hard before the acetone evaporates, and that's it. It's not super sharp, but it's really just a guide at this point. With the work clamped up in the vise, I'll go over all the lines with a scribe and ruler. I want to keep my engravings as straight as possible, so these fine lines will be more precise than the transferred drawing. It's a tedious process, but a necessary one, I think. One good slip with the graver and I'm pooched, so better safe than sorry. In an attempt to darken those lines, I tried laying on some good old layout fluid. I think the light sanding that I gave it after did more to darken those than the blue stuff. Oh well, I can still see them, even if you might not. Alright, time to start the engraving. I made this graver myself, and all credit to Uri Tukman, whose video on the subject was invaluable. It came as a piece of tool steel, which was pre-hardened, so I had to anneal it in order to shape it with files. I then heat-treated it, sharpened it, and put it into a handle. Now, I'm very much a novice when it comes to engraving, so I'm taking it slow here, though it's not like it can be done fast anyway, at least not with hand tools. I won't subject you to this all in real time though, so how about we pick up the pace? That's better. At this stage I'm just getting in the outlines of the ship, and doing my very best to keep those straight, as any variation from the lines will be pretty obvious. Once I've got those down, I can get into the smaller details. I don't have a cool swiveling engraver's vise, but this little one does pivot, so I make the most of it. I'll cut everything that's comfortable in one direction, and then I'll spin it around to continue. As I get a feel for things, I become a bit more confident, though that's perhaps overselling it. Less terrified would be more accurate. The biggest challenge is the material. As you might have guessed, the meteorite has an alternating grain direction and wildly variable hardness. Most of my experience has been on soft metals like brass and copper, so this is a world apart. Even so, I keep at it, and eventually I get the design tooled in. It's pretty lightly engraved at this stage, but at least I didn't veer off catastrophically. I'll leave it there for now and move on to the next one. For Artemis, I'm going to make a little Jazz Bashara in her lunar EVA suit. Unlike the Hail Mary, this design doesn't have a straight line in it anywhere, so we'll see what that's like to engrave. This transfer is also a bit faint, so I'll go over it again with the scribe to fix in those lines. And now's a good time to resharpen my graver. I made a simple little jig to hold it at the correct angle. To sharpen it, I'm using a double-sided diamond plate. This one is 325 grit on one side and 1200 on the other. To finish off, I use a small diamond sharpener to put what's called the heel on the graver. It's a tiny little adjustment, but without it, it tends to dig into the material. If it passes the old thumbnail test, we're good to go. Right away I found that following the freehand curves was far easier. It also seemed that the metal was a bit easier to work in this area, which will be proven true a bit later. It's a bit of a dance, coordinating both hands and my body position in order to get smooth curves, and I'm no dancer, but I do my best. I'm lucky that this design is pretty loose, so any inconsistencies mostly blend in. A light sanding at the end helps to knock down any little burrs, and I'd say that went pretty smoothly. Time now for my rover design. I don't know how plausible of a design it would be for a real Mars rover, but I think it's recognizable as such, so I'm gonna go with it. Once again, I'll scribe it in first. This time, I've got a combination of straight lines and curves, so this might be the hardest of the three to execute. I tried a grease pencil to darken the lines this time, and I think it was slightly better than the blue stuff. I did my best to stabilize this bit of footage, but things were getting pretty shaky. I've got my vise raised up on a wooden box after all to get at a comfortable working height, so it's not the most solid setup. For any future engraving projects, I'd do well to come up with something that's a little bit more rigid and robust. Anyway, that's all three pieces achieved without any disasters, so I'm going to call stage 1 a success. But at this point, the engraving is pretty light, so I think I want to go over everything again to make it pop out a bit more. For that, I'll switch to this wider graver. It takes a bit more of a bite, but with the lines already tooled in and quite a few hours of experience now, I feel fairly confident. I still haven't gotten any faster though. In certain areas of each piece, I want to add a bit more contrast, like in the windows of the rover, for example. To do that, I'll use a straight graver to remove a layer of material in those areas. It's not very much, but it should be enough to make it visually distinct. To add texture and to disguise my rough tool marks, I'll use my hammer and scribe to stipple the whole area. This added roughness will show up well when I darken the pieces later. That's some stellar camera work there, Den. Good to know that after 6 years of this YouTube stuff, you can still get your fat fingers in the way. That's better. Anyway, after the stippling, I found the edges needed a bit of cleaning up. With that done, I'd had about enough engraving, so I decided to start cutting those out of the blank. That meant getting it off of the support block. Unfortunately, that also meant getting the hot glue off of it, which proved more difficult than I thought it would be. I let it soak in acetone, and I thought it would just either dissolve completely or roll right off. Turns out that even after an hour or so, the glue still took quite a bit of scrubbing and scraping to remove it completely. So, pro tip, hot glue really sticks to meteorites. Eventually I got it all cleaned off, and so it's time to move on to sawing. I'm using a jeweler's saw and the finest blades that I have. By finest, I mean thinnest, not like some kind of, your finest blades, good sir. Right, anyway. Okay. This slice is only 0.5 millimeter thick, so I work close to the edge of my tool rest to keep it supported. I'm starting over here with Jazz to cut off this excess piece, which could get into the way as I maneuver the saw around. That wasn't too bad. Less stressful than the engraving, that's for sure. I may have spoken too soon, though.
Well, that's interesting. That's a good warning to me, because that split could have just as easily happened onto my accent piece as in the waist. And that just fractured right along one of the grain lines in the meteorite. So, as much as he looks like Astro Boy here, or she, kind of cool, but I think I'm going to cut that off. But just word to the wise that this metal is fairly delicate, so need to be careful. The helmet cracked a little bit. Oh boy. Well, believe it or not, I was able to find the piece that broke off. Using a magnetic tool here to manipulate it isn't the best idea. I'm not certain if I'd be able to reattach that, maybe with some CA glue. I don't know. And it's still got a little piece attached that needs to be cut off anyway, so I'm going to have to think about what to do with that. I think I'll just sit on that for a while, though, and put it aside and continue carefully cutting out these two, and fingers crossed I won't have any problems with those. Okay, I've had a little think about this, and I've got a plan. I'm fortunate enough to have this offcut piece, which is large enough to redo my astronaut. So I'm going to recarve it, and hopefully that one will turn out without any fractures. And I'll still have this one as a backup if I decide that I want to glue back the broken off piece. But to make sure that I don't have anything like that happen again, I'm going to take the remaining piece, I'm going to glue it to this thin plywood. And then I can cut through the metal and the plywood at the same time, and that should give it enough reinforcement and backing to prevent any pieces from breaking off. At least that's the plan. Sounds reasonable, so let's give it a try.
So that was nearly a disaster, but I got lucky, and I'd rather be lucky than good any day. Anyway, while I've got the heat gun out, I'll get that offcut stuck back onto the backing block for later. Now let's see if this backing will make it any harder to cut. I basically can't even tell that it's there, so that's good, and the workpiece feels much more rigid. But do you remember how I said that this meteorite really varies in hardness?
I noticed this while I was both doing the engraving and the stippling in this area, and now it's proving true while I'm cutting that the material is way harder in this area than elsewhere. The saw is hardly touching it at all. It's going to take me some time to make these cuts here, but hopefully it'll go a little bit faster elsewhere. Oh well, carry on. I think I'm going to put a new blade on here, see if it'll help.
For anyone about to drop a comment about it, I am using paraffin wax on the blade as a lubricant, which is the little tea candle that you can see in the background there. Okay, I didn't use it in this instance apparently, but it's among the tricks in my bag. And for what it's worth, it wasn't much help with this star iron.
Feels better? Well, switch it up again.
It was about this time that this meteorite started eating my blades faster than Cookie Monster on a bag of Oreos.
Oh well.
I suspect that in addition to iron and nickel in this thing, there were also minerals that acted like sandpaper on the saw teeth.
Try again. One intact spaceship. Good. Ah. If I'm not careful, I'm going to run out of blades. Well, it was a good run, but we're dull again. So I'll come in from the other side. Just got to do the back end. That one's done too. A little bit messy, but I hit something really hard right there. Whoops.
Well, I guess 2 out of 3 isn't bad. It's a pity about Jazz here. Maybe I'll call that one Mark Watney with his cracked helmet instead. This redo better count though, because this is my last piece. Wish me luck. Okay, stage 1 is a success. Let's see if it'll hold together for stage 2 this time. Alright, we made it through in one piece. Now I just need to clear out this little negative space under the right arm. To do that I need to drill a tiny hole there to get a blade in. And the meteorite claims another victim. That should be just enough to pass the blade through, and then I can saw out that last little gap. It's too tight for even my smallest file, so the saw is the best tool here. As it happens, the blade broke on the very last cut, so I don't know if that's good luck or a final insult. Either way, I've got all 3 pieces cut out successfully. Nice. Now I just need to clean them up. Some of my cuts were pretty rough, especially in those difficult spots around the rover, so I'll use a bunch of different needle files to refine the edges. Hopefully the meteorite won't eat any of those. I figured that it made sense to leave the workpieces mounted on the backing plywood. It didn't impede the filing at all, and at this point I'd rather not risk breaking anything. All the work that I've done on these so far has pretty much obliterated that Widmanstätten pattern, and without it they look like they're just made of basic steel, so I need to bring that back out. To do that, I first need to polish them up. I'm working on my diamond plate simply because it's nice and flat. To do the polishing, I'll work my way through consecutively finer grits of sandpaper, all the way up to 2000 grit. This doesn't remove much material, and as I already went over the engravings, I'm not worried about wearing my way down through them. That's got those nice and shiny now, and the engravings still look fine. My stippled areas weren't very deep though, and those have suffered a bit, so I'll go over those spots again. Without the backing block to hold those, I'll use a magnet to hold them instead. That way I can have both hands free for the stippling. Otherwise they'll be jumping around too much. I can then flip them over to remove the backing, with a piece of paper towel in between to prevent scratches on my nicely polished surfaces. As before, I'll give those a long soak in acetone to loosen up the glue. And, as before, it was a pain to remove. Okay, there they are, all cleaned and polished. Time to bring back the patterning. To do that, I'll lightly brush them with an acid, in this case ferric chloride. It's commercially called etching and is mainly used on circuit boards, I think. Being an acid, I've got a neutralizing baking soda solution and some clear water standing by. The reaction is almost instantaneous. I watch it carefully, and when I think it looks good, I'll stop the reaction with the baking soda solution, and then I'll give it a rinse in clear water. The patterning on Jazz's EVA suit almost gives it a camouflage look. I bet she would have appreciated that. The patterns on the Hail Mary are the best of the three, I think. It's exactly how I pictured the mottled appearance of xenonite as described in the book. Okay, those are almost done. The last thing I want to do is to fill in the etchings to really make them stand out. I did some reading on what materials to use, and the best candidate that I had on hand was sealing wax. This wax was originally red, but I melted it down and added graphite to give it this near black color. To apply it, I just need to heat up my miniatures and smear it on liberally. I'll squeegee off the excess while it's still warm, and then I'll clean them up once they've cooled and the wax is hardened. A popsicle stick made for a good non-marring scraper to get rid of the majority of the surface wax. Any remaining residue I cleaned up with alcohol. The wax in the engravings remained more or less untouched. So finally, here we have Mark Watney's rover, looking very much like it's got over 3,200 clicks on the odometer. Here's Jazz Bashara, ready to tackle anything that the moon or the bartender can throw at her. And finally, the Hail Mary, the last best hope of planet Earth, crafted in miniature from pure iridium xenonite. These are ready to go on the books and sent off to Andy now, but that's for another video. To see that, head on over to my main channel. For now, thanks for joining me for this adventure, and I'll see you next time.